Hello, I'm Jenya Delima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the author-focused podcast that takes a whole-person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. Author Ari Rosenschein is back, and we're going to be talking about everyone's favorite subject, marketing. But he has some unique insights that are going to help guide listeners through something that can easily feel overwhelming. This is Music Industry Tips for Book Marketing. Well, first, it is a pleasure to have you back. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be back. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for being open to the invitation. So, when did you first get started in the music industry?
It's funny, I started playing music, I'll say semi-professionally, at 15. I'd already been playing guitar and picking out U2 songs and sitting around singing to myself at home for a while. But I joined a band when I was 15, and we started playing in clubs in the Bay Area in
Mm-hmm.
California, where I grew up. And throughout high school, I continued to play in bands. And by college, I was playing in sort of more serious bands. And then it was in my 20s, when I moved to Los Angeles, that I kind of had a different shift in my career that, after many years, became more of a professional career, I guess you would
I
say.
think that's how most things go for most of us. It starts off with, I enjoy this, and then, all right, how can I make this a living?
Absolutely. I always wanted to do music professionally, but I think I had this sort of fantasy that you would get signed by one record label and then they would put you on tour and you'd be playing for people all over the world. And what actually happened was I played in many bands, and then I started co-writing with people as a member of bands. And then eventually I started putting solo records out, and some of those songs got used on television shows. And then I got a publishing deal based on some of the songs that I was writing with other people, and then another publishing deal. And it kind of things kept happening to the point where I was able to create a career as a professional musician, though not I'm not famous by any means. I tell people that I'm like, I've had songs you may have heard on lots of television shows or in advertisements, or maybe a co-write with another artist that you might like, but I am not a name that you would that you would know. But though I've been doing this continually for um, well over 3 decades, yeah.
I mean, I'm already seeing some parallels here with the music industry and books with that whole thing too about my first book was going to become the next great American novel. I'm going to be signed by Simon and Schuster or whoever, and they'll give me a six-figure deal.
It is so utterly similar. It's crazy. And in fact, some of the things that I had to really kind of reconcile myself to with publishing when I entered the world of publishing was I have to start from the beginning again in a
Oh,
certain
yeah.
way. I don't have years and years of doing this and people I've opened for, and um tours that I've been on, and music placements that I can fall back on. It was like, well, I've written for these magazines and this is what I've done, and there you go. But what I have found is that in writing, there is a benefit to being a debut author
Hmm.
that I didn't realize people really, there's still sort of this magic fairy tale of like the debut author you've never heard of before, and this book comes
Oh,
out and lights
yes.
the world aflame. And then I've had to kind of dismantle that for myself too, and just be like, hey, I'm a writer. I can't stop doing this. I love doing this. And much like music, there will be many ups and downs. There will be books that maybe reach less people that I'm very proud of, books that reach more people that
Mhm.
maybe don't have as much of a personal connection to me. But it's not really my choice. Once they get out in the world, they are the world's.
That's so true. I mean, it's the same thing with music too,
It absolutely is. And you have to, at least I have to, kind of just be appreciative for every reader.
right?
And I'm just kind of realizing it's a different story for everybody. And the whole don't compare yourself to other people. Comparison is the thief of joy type of stuff.
When you first started marketing your music, what did you do, or what were the methods that worked the best for you?
It's funny. That's a really great question. In the old days, when I first started playing in high school and college, it was the era of flyering. We put up flyers.
Oh,
We
yeah.
sent physical demo tapes to venues that we wanted to play and to the weekly newspapers and the weekly music magazines or monthly music magazines sent stuff around. And as tools developed and online music became sort of the norm, like there's so many different places you can send stuff. I can in 2 minutes I can send an email with a track or like a PDF of a book
Mm-hmm.
to hundreds of different blogs
True.
and stuff like that. So I've kind of had to develop, my understanding of the tools as they go in music. Those tools, started with, at one point, it was MySpace that was the thing. Everyone was loading songs up to MySpace, and it was all about how are those MySpace listens looking. And then things evolved and people started using platforms like Spotify. And now it's like, they're looking at Spotify and Bandcamp to see how those are doing. And it's the same with books. Every time I can't believe how much marketing technology I've had to learn
Mm-hmm.
putting books out independently. It's like making my way through Ingram Spark. We talked about that on our last podcast. And then trying to figure out BookBub, and then there's BookFunnel to help people get a downloadable PDF of a free giveaway that I'm doing, and then that has to link up to my Mailchimp. So the back end of Mailchimp needs to make sure that it's like there's a constantly evolving set of tools, and if you're
Mm-hmm.
not willing to learn those tools, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So I've had to challenge myself with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say this one thing in terms of physical media that has been really interesting is I found myself kind of hearkening back to the old days of the flyering cars and all that kind of stuff, or not
Huh.
cars. Like I've been I had some sort of old first editions of my first book, Coasting,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a little bookmark for the new book, Dr. Z and Matty Take Telegraph. So I put the bookmark in those old books, and this is an idea that my wife had, and I put some of those in the little reading libraries in
Oh,
various neighborhoods. So
yeah.
I was kind of like, wait, maybe this is like getting back to the old days of like physical marketing, like putting something out in the universe, and maybe somebody will pick it up and find the book in that way.
Mhm. I've heard
So
of people doing that too with copies of their books, like maybe their leftover author copies or their proofs or something. Yeah, and I know that there's at least one of the big five does marketing campaigns that are similar to that. But this is also all fairly new, where yeah, they just go around and they pick different people to leave copies of the books in their little free libraries, and then they just take a picture of it.
that is so cool to hear that, because this has been like a very kind of DIY project, and I felt a little bashful at first. I was like, I don't know, like I usually put books that I've finished in there. I don't usually put my own books in there. But then
Right.
once I got used to it, it kind of gave me that same feeling as when I started sending CDs and tapes
Oh,
around, like in the
yeah.
early part of my music career. I was like, you know what? It's like a ship, or not a ship in a bottle, a message in a bottle.
Yeah, completely agree. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about too is that we hear so much about author branding. And I think anyone who has ever been devoted to any particular band or singer or group realizes that branding is also a big deal in the music industry as well. But do you think, well, first, why do you think that this personal branding is important? But also, should it change depending on the medium that you're working in? So could you take, let's say, like your musician persona and just copy and paste it over to your author persona?
These are really, really good questions.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I thought a lot about this, and I've attempted to sort of create some distinction between my music brand and my author brand. My music is under a different sort of project name at this point. It's under the name Stav, Stahv. My solo records back in the 2000s through 2012, 13 were under the name Ari Shine. So it wasn't quite the same name as my author name, which is Ari Rosenschein,
Hmm.
but it's pretty easy to find and pretty interconnected. If people Google me, it all kind of comes up together. And what's interesting is even there have been points where I've been like, wow, it would be nice to add some of the accolades of music type stuff to my author bio or something like that. But I've tried to be tasteful about that and not try to lean too much on one or the other, because I want the words to be taken seriously as they are and not look just kind of like, hey, this is some person trying their hand at another thing, and maybe they'll try a hand. For
Yeah.
me, it's like, no, I put these are both disciplines for me, and they're things that take they're incredibly time consuming and obsessive passions of mine to write and to make music. And it's definitely not like I'm just jumping around from between different mediums. So I use different photos for my author photo and music type stuff. The bio is different. It lists some of my publication credits and a little bit about my book. And actually most sort of the most profound difference is that I call myself an author now. For a long time, I called myself a writer because
Mhm.
I am a writer by trade. I write about music and artists and stuff like that. So the biggest shift for me was making that shift to calling myself an author, somebody who
Oh,
has put books out. But on my site now, it takes you to an author page with all the stuff. It says author slash musician, and then there's a separate page that is a little bit less robust, frankly, at this time for music type stuff. And I put my author brand forward,
hmm,
I think, a little bit in the last few years.
right,
I
yeah.
follow lots of authors and see the way they create sort of a persona. It's just themselves, but a little larger.
That's an interesting take on it, but it makes sense too because we're not necessarily putting forth the whole person, but vibe, I think, captures it perfectly. So we're picking maybe that vibe that our books give off, or at least the vibe that our most popular books give off, and then matching that somehow, or at least showing how it's complementary to what we're writing.
Absolutely. And I've been kind of lucky, or at least maybe it's just the whole idea of write what you know, is that both my books, they lean on pop culture and music in a way that is, if you know me, fairly on brand. I think just finding an authentic way to represent yourself. Just
Hmm.
be yourself, whatever that is. Some people are more buttoned up, and their author brand is more buttoned up, almost like a lecturer kind of aesthetic. Whatever your thing is, the more real you can be. I kind of aspire to be more real, actually,
You
with my.
seem very, very real. So you just feel
Thank you.
very open and just who you are is who you are, even when we're interviewing.
I appreciate that.
So you mentioned looking to other author accounts and sort of getting inspiration from that. Did you do that also with the music profiles that you put together or anything you did with music marketing?
Absolutely. I do. I mean, I'm definitely aware, especially when it comes to people using project names instead of they're using their own name. I'm always interested. Okay, oh, so this band is actually really this person. For example, Illuminati Hotties is this really cool kind of indie pop band. One of our writers interviewed them for an article for work, and they are super creative, and it's really the brainchild of one person, but they give it a band name. As
Mm.
authors, we don't have that luxury. It's really us. I guess our version of that would be using a pen name. Like some authors will choose to put their romance under a pen name and then their literary fiction or YA under a different name. I'm trying to create some clarity. I want people to be able to find my books. So I definitely don't want to put too many. There's already a little confusion. My name is Solomon Ari Rosenschein. It's a mouthful. There's a lot of music things I've done over the years that have that name listed.
Mm.
Ari Rosenschein is my author name, and it's also what I go by most commonly. So there's a lot of stuff with that. Then I had the solo records underneath Ari Shine, so there's some of that going around. So between those three, I already feel like I have enough.
Right,
There's
that's a
enough.
lot to juggle.
There's a lot of confusion. So I'm really trying to just keep it Ari Rosenschein as much as I can.
At least the names are similar enough that you're not getting confused. Like, if someone says Steve and you realize, oh, right, I'm Steve today, I should be responding to that.
Absolutely. There no, it's mostly my grandmother called me Solomon and the people at the DMV. But other than that, it's been pretty much Ari.
Well, are there any marketing strategies that you can think of that are successful for music but might not translate to book marketing?
Wow, that's a really, really neat one because there's so many different corollaries. Like, for example, in music, there's the whole playlist thing. Make a playlist and then put your song on there somewhere to get people maybe who are fans of the other bands listening to the playlist and then they discover you. I guess the author version of that would be a reading list. I would say that can be powerful. I don't know if it's as commonly used as like playlists. Playlists are pretty much the baseline for a lot of people marketing their music. And there's been so much back and forth. I was going to say promotional videos, sort of like, like the old school
Oh,
video, like
yeah.
the MTV style video. People make those sort of more on their own now and create, music videos, but on a budget. And I feel like in 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 publishing, it's a little bit more overt. It's
Mm.
like, are you a fan of this? Well, let me get your hands on my new book, The Prince and you know,
Right.
and the Ballerina, Part 3, or the sci-fi saga part 4. There's a little bit more genre identification. I think that in music, people are often they're a little bit more hesitant to be grouped in with the genre, though I am seeing some more savvy marketers in music who are like, are you a fan of The Cure and Depeche Mode and this band? Well, then check out my band. Like they're being
Oh,
more
really?
overt. Yeah, it's kind of newer, like because in my day it was really about being different. And
Yeah.
I feel like the worlds with social media, especially TikTok marketing, the worlds of music and publishing are getting closer and closer. I mean, for example, in music, you have gigs.
Hmm.
In publishing, you have readings. Though I will say bands tend to live off their gigs more than authors rely on readings. I feel like readings are
Yeah.
important. They're important, but a lot of the action can still happen online, whereas bands seem to really do need to get out there and play.
Yeah, even just thinking then about audience engagement and how do those differ? Because like with the gigs then, for instance, I'd imagine you're really looking for in-person audience engagement to pull people in, not so much that distanced audience engagement that we can use with mostly online marketing for books.
In music, there is that sort of get on the road and do that, where I think that authors are used to sort of it's really one person, one book. It's a little bit more of a slow moving thing. And then of course with Amazon, and once you start harnessing Amazon ads and Facebook ads, which I have not yet done, but I know many people are very successful with that, that becomes that bigger audience, the same way you
Right.
would in a concert.
I think there's almost too like a different energy to each of these venues and these experiences. And that probably also leads in a different way to creating fans and then leading to that purchase of merchandise. So I know they've done studies before on that, like almost group effect of being in a crowd, not necessarily at a concert, but like at a sports event or something of the similar, where it's just like this build up of energy and excitement that it's not just yours, but that you're feeding off all these other people. Whereas at a book reading, it tends to be very quiet and reserved. You're not really participating because even when we're at a concert and say we're jumping up and down or we're screaming out the lyrics, that still feels participatory in a way rather than passive listening.
I haven't been to very many rowdy readings. They tend to be kind of calm and sort of internal.
Right, unless it's like preschool story time with the library, those are pretty rowdy.
Those get rowdy. The difference is little kids.
Yes.
But
And they
yeah,
don't really
it's
have any
different.
spending money, so.
Yes, that's actually something really interesting I found. For a YA book, bookstores have a different some bookstores just flat out don't do YA readings. Unless, of course, I'm
Oh,
sure if it was a really big author, but a lot of them have just sort of decided it's just not a crowd that's going to buy a lot of books. Whereas like, cooking books and stuff with a more mature audience, an older audience, I think is just a better bet. It's different with a YA book, and that's been something I've been learning. Like just like with music, every time out is it's a different product and a different market. It's always evolving.
mhm. That really seems to be the main message that is being carried through this whole conversation is that adaptability and knowing that things change. And even if we read articles about the psychology of marketing, we're seeing that our brains cannot keep up with the level of information, marketing information that's being given to us all at one time. So then you have the added difficulty of, okay, well, how do I break through that? And how do I not just add to the noise?
You just nailed it. It's so much information now. How does anybody make a choice?
Mhm. Well, do you think that your background in music and already knowing some of these marketing techniques has given you sort of a leg up when it comes to other people who are brand new to marketing?
I think it has. I think I'm used to packaging myself for gigs, for festival performances. Um, even, gosh, for press, like I'm used to creating a little pitch. And when I just kind of had to get my head around what is required in the publishing world, the way query letters look,
Mm.
the way advanced reading copies work, sort of the machinations of publishing, that's what I've had to learn. But I think the basic concept of packaging myself into something or packaging the book into something that people can kind of understand, like, okay, this is a 90s book set in the 90s. It's about two skaters. It's a coming of age story. Give them the ballpark really quick. That stuff I think I've learned from music. Like people don't have very much time. They just want to know what you're doing. And if they're interested in it, they will pursue it further. And if they're not interested in it, they're not for you.
What about direct responses? So your personal direct responses to readers versus maybe how you would respond to someone who's a fan of your music. Do those also differ, or were you given any guidance on how to approach that?
It's funny. A lot of I've had some direct messages or emails or texts from people who've completed the book, and I would say it's very moving when somebody it tells me that they've finished the book and it meant so much to them, or I read their review. Like when I read these things, it's very moving to me, and I don't get that same. You don't spend as long with a listener. They
Mm-hmm.
don't spend as long with your music. So there isn't, and they don't really have a forum to write a review quite like that. It's just not like that on Spotify. People aren't dropping reviews on Spotify.
Yeah,
But
all I
there are
can think
little,
of is like the YouTube comments maybe
YouTube is
under
the
the video.
YouTube is the
Wow,
closest.
excellent video. We'll listen again.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll listen again. Heart, heart, heart. This is fire.
Yeah.
Um, but like whereas with books, people they really want you to know. And I do the same thing when I write my reviews for books. I'm like, in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I really hope that Walter Mosley, I hope he reads this review because I really love this book, or I hope that Kathleen Glass reads this review because I really want her to see this. And I think there's a little bit of that. It's like you're sending them
Yes.
a little letter, a little message. So yeah, it's a lot more personal. The conversations that I have with people, and a lot more meaningful.
Yeah. I was thinking too, just as you were talking about how, like in any relationship where we give a certain amount and we expect to receive close to that or equal in return. And it's sort of the same way with some of these author reader interactions versus musician. I don't even know what we'd call them, YouTube reader relationships. All I have to do is like your comment versus someone does write, let's say, like 500-word review and talks about how this moved me, it changed my life, it helped me with X, Y, or Z, that maybe we should put a little more thought into our reply to them than just a like.
I totally agree. Books have a way of sticking with us. Even
Mhm.
books I don't remember exactly what the plot was, they become part of my life memory.
Yeah.
They stick with you.
Well, that is so well said. Well, for our final question, do you have one main marketing technique that you would recommend that you borrowed from the music industry?
I would say in music, packaging and having a well curated pitch. That is something I've definitely borrowed. The book cover, a picture of the author, a really pithy description at the front, then a longer one. Making it very easy for people to
Mhm.
get the information they need. I attach PDFs in both formats, no matter like they take up so little space.
Yeah.
Having like it doesn't hurt anybody to have, if they don't want it, no problem. But I try to make things as accessible and simple for people as possible because people are so busy, especially editors, podcasters, reviewers. Like people just want to get the stuff. Don't make people hunt for it. So that's been something I've learned from music is to try to put everything out as simply as possible and make it accessible.
Fantastic advice. Well, thank you again for being back on the show. It's been great.
Yes, I appreciate it, Jan.
Yep.
Thanks again for having me.
And thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes for additional information. And then please join me next week when Ava Morgan visits to share how she writes about family secrets, but also why readers can't get enough of them. Thanks again.